Coming up in this video, I'm going to get down to the bottom of the primer wars of 2018. Hey everyone, welcome back to Mini Junkie. So this will be a short video. It's probably going to lose me subscribers because it's contentious. I don't know why it's so contentious, but it is on a lot of the Facebook groups and Reddit posts and forums and you name it. There's this weird thing going on where people are slagging, you know, they're really bagging on Vallejo surface primer, and then they're evangelizing Stynylrez by Badger as if it's God's gift to primer, which it might be. And so, and then there's a lot of other stuff, like, you know, people having trouble, by the way, these are Airbrush primer. Like, I'll actually see people say, oh God, Vallejo, get rid of that garbage. It's garbage primer, throw it away, avoid it at all costs. Seriously, they say that. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? I don't know what your experience has been, but this stuff works fabulously for me, always. But you got people having a lot of trouble airbrushing them, saying that they clog, saying that they're splattering, thinning them, which I'll get to that, reducing them, and, you know, waiting 24 hours to let them dry before they paint, and having them rub off, and all kinds of stuff. It's just, it's insanity. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of over dramatizing. It's primer. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take two miniatures from The Other Side. It's a new game by Weird Miniatures. They're like a PVC blend, kind of like Star Wars Legion. They come pre-assembled. They're not like a hard plastic off sprues. And so what I've done is I've washed them, which I usually don't, but I've washed them with some Dawn dish soap to get any mold release off. That's one thing. If your primer's washing off or wiping off, it should not be doing that. Maybe you have some resin you haven't washed or whatever. And if it's board game minis or anything that's like a PVC style mini, you probably should wash it just to be safe, because your primer should not be wiping off with your finger ever. So yeah, I'm going to take those two minis. I'm going to prime one with Stynylrez and one with surface primer. I'm going to let them dry for like seriously 5 minutes, and then we're going to test the resilience, test the finish, etc. We're just going to give them a shot and see which one of these sucks, because I'm sure one of them does based on the conversation online. Alright guys, let's get into this. We're going to be using two primers, as I mentioned, Vallejo Black Surface Primer and Stynylrez Black Primer as well. Both straight out of the bottle, and we'll be using them as, these are the test subjects, two Weird Miniatures, The Other Side troops from the Abyssinia faction. I used identical poses, and they both have been washed. So here we're going to take the Vallejo straight out of the bottle, and I'm not using any editing, or I'm not fooling you guys. I'm just doing this straight up. So right out of the bottle, I have a my airbrush is a 0.3 millimeter nozzle, and I have it set pretty high on pressure, probably about 40 psi. Granted, that's kind of high, so I have since tried it down to about 30 psi, and it's still sprayed this primer quite nicely. But you can see it's coming out, it's going on smooth. There's no splattering, there's no clogging happening here. Getting nice coverage. I tend to go a little heavy with my primer. I don't know what. Wow, dogs. That's just the way it is. So now I've covered him very quickly, and I've set him aside to dry. Next, we're going to take the Badger Stynylrez. I'm shaking it up. All I've done to the airbrush is cleaned it out with the water from my sink. Not even airbrush cleaner, actually. I often don't use that. And no change in pressure, no change in airbrush, anything like that. And just kind of get out some of the excess water out of there from cleaning it and make sure it sprays okay. And then, yep, just spraying it on. Pretty exciting, priming this guy. No weird behavior, no spidering, nothing out of the ordinary here, just a straight up primer's job. And like I said, I put it on pretty thick most of the time, but it tends to shrink and self-level and all those things. But no clogging, no sputtering, no splattering, just really nice primer. Alright, so here's both models after about, I want to say 10 minutes. And I'm just holding up the Stynylrez to show that the one on the right is the Stynylrez, the one on the left is the Vallejo. Both are black, both look great. The Vallejo's a little bit more of a satin finish. Maybe it needed to dry a little bit longer or whatever. Honestly, not a big deal to the painting process that will follow. And, you know, I wanted to show like rubbing on it with my thumb. I don't know what people are doing to make this come off, but it's not coming off. And, you know, like I said, I'm rubbing on edges, and I'm not being gentle here. I'm not going to wreck the model, but I'm pushing pretty hard. And it's fine. It's very resilient, holds up great. And guess what? Same thing here with the Stynylrez. A little bit more of a matte finish. Maybe that's a preference, but rubbing on it with my thumb and my finger on the edges, it's not coming off. It's on there. Very nice, very excellent working surface, and no complaints whatsoever. Both of these, I think I'm buffing it a little bit with my thumb, but that's another story. Both of these primers went on great, dried great, and are ready to take paint right now, roughly, 5 or 10 minutes after I applied it. Just long enough to basically dry, and that's it. Certainly not 24 hours later. Both of these primers work great, they're resilient, and they're ready to paint within minutes. No complaints on either of them. Alright, so guys, based on the results of the priming the two miniatures, and as you see, the coverage is great. They flow nicely out of the airbrush, right out of the bottle, no thinning. They dry really pretty fast. I'm putting paint on them within, well, actually I didn't paint them in the video, but I generally paint within like 10 minutes. I let them dry. Sometimes I use a hair dryer if they're not like soft plastic, and I get painting. And you saw I wasn't just pretending. I was rubbing my thumb and finger very hard on the miniatures and fast, even over like edges and points that should really, arguably, the primer should have a really tough time sticking to those, and it's fine. It's very resilient, both brands. And so what I will say is, primer can have a shelf life, I believe, and Stynylrez, for example, for the longest time, you couldn't let it freeze, and I suspect, for example, my white primer, which I didn't show and I'm not going to, but I have a lot of trouble with my white Stynylrez. I think it probably froze, and I've discovered very recently that there was a bunch of stuff at the bottom of it. And then I had a bottle of Vallejo, and it wasn't necessarily surface primer, but it was, I don't know, it was one of their metallics. And yeah, it had turned to sludge. The whole bottle was sludge. Like, you couldn't use it. And so what I'm getting at is there's bad bottles out there. So you may get a surface primer that's just past its shelf life. It's been on the shelf for a while. It's starting to congeal, maybe, or it's just not at its peak. So it may clog your brush, right? Or you may get a Stynylrez that froze, and maybe it's not working right, and it's going on really weird and streaky, which is what was happening to me with my white. It's not the primer. The primer is designed to be airbrushed. It goes on great. It's self-leveling, and it's very resilient, and paint sticks to it great. Like, that's it. So if you're having trouble, maybe grab a different bottle, or contact the company and ask them if you can. I literally got a new bottle of that other Vallejo one sent to me from Spain, because it's not right. It should work flawlessly out of the bottle into your airbrush and onto the miniature. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you're not offended by my choice of liking both of these primers. If you found this interesting and informative, consider sharing, liking, and make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time.